In a world where we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to chase happiness, what if I told you that this pursuit of happiness is what's holding you back from actually achieving happiness? So let's take a deep dive into happiness, debunk some myths, challenge some societal norms, and unveil the hidden side of happiness that no one talks about. So get ready to question everything you thought you knew about happiness. Alright, let's get into it. So before I tell you why happiness is so overrated, let's look into what happiness is. So if you type in happiness into Wikipedia, what Wikipedia will tell you is that happiness in the context of mental or emotional states is positive or pleasant emotions ranging from contentment to intense joy. And to be honest, you probably didn't need Wikipedia to tell you what happiness is, right? We all know what happiness is. Well, you probably know what happiness feels like, but describing it is actually quite difficult because it's pretty subjective and obviously depends on context. Like one thing can make someone else happy and that exact same thing can make someone else, go crazy.
Go crazy! Go stupid!
Well, if that is the case, then why is it that when you think of, someone who's happy, other than someone smiling, you start to imagine certain aspects of their life, like how much money they earn, what kind of car they drive, what kind of house they live in, what their husband or wife looks like, their physical appearance, what job they have, what type of clothes they wear. You kind of start picturing things that you would attribute to someone who would be happy. But if you break it down, if you break each of those things down, what do any of them have to do with happiness? Because you'll start to realize that it's quite clear that, the general population, our idea of happiness has been spoon-fed to us by the media that we consume, whether it's TV shows, music, movies, and it's clear what their agenda is, and it's to keep us consuming. It's to keep us searching for happiness in things. So it keeps us in a state of, forever chasing the next thing that we think will make us happy. Whether it's, getting a new job, getting a new car, buying the latest clothes. So the truth is, it's quite clear that none of these things, lead to true happiness, do they? So it's pretty safe to assume that the things you think make you happy actually don't. And I think I know just the reason why. And that's because our brain's strongest intuitions are actually usually completely wrong. And I know that might be a hard pill to swallow. If you're anything like me anyway, you kind of feel like you kind of know it all, but kind of realizing that you don't is pretty uncomfortable. But yeah, let me explain. So our brains work in very weird and somewhat mysterious ways. For one, we almost always overestimate our emotional responses to both negative and positive experiences. And this is actually called impact bias. So basically, just think of a time where you were looking forward to something for a long time. Like it felt like everyone else around you had it or were doing it, and you were convinced that once you had this thing or did this thing, you'd be happy, you'd be sorted, like everything would just fall into place. And then eventually when you do that thing or get that thing, you have a sudden realization that, is that it? So for example, we overestimate how good it would feel to, earn a certain amount of money or build a certain type of body or physique. But we also overestimate how bad it feels to, be rejected or to just not have that luxury item that you're convinced you need. And this is something that's super relevant to me because this is how I felt a lot of times throughout my life. I've always wanted to chase things that I thought would, bring me some happiness, and then once I do achieve those things, I'm just left with a feeling of just disappointment and just is that it? For example, my physique, I used to be pretty skinny, and I used to feel as a bigger guy, a guy that has some muscle in him, his life must be just so easy, he must be happy all the time, just wakes up and he's feeling great. But as a guy now that I'm not the biggest guy ever, but I'm not skinny anymore, innit? So for someone that has a decent physique, and I realize that that's not the the be all end all of your life, and that's not where you're actually going to get your happiness from. And this is because our brain has a very annoying but also useful ability to get used to things. Because think about it like this: if you landed on Earth today, let's say it was your first day on Earth, and someone told you that every human, or almost every human, had access to a device that could connect millions of people around the world to each other, and also project millions of different images onto that same device, you'd probably be amazed, wouldn't you? Be like, that's a crazy invention, right? But to us, this is just a phone, it's something that we use every day now. It's just something we don't even really acknowledge. When's the last time you took time to just look up into the sky and really admire it and appreciate, the beauty of life and the world that we're in. And you hardly pay attention to the fact that we're on a big spinning rock in infinite time and space in the middle of a big Milky Way with other bunch of planets, and and that's because we've got so used to everything around us that we kind of start to devalue it. Another annoying ability of the brain is that we constantly compare things to each other. And this is because we're actually unable to think in absolutes. As in, something can't be great, we have to compare it to something else that's better or worse. Like, you're listening to like your favorite artist's new album, and you were like, oh, the album's good, but their last album though, that was different. If you don't believe me, here's a good example. So which circle is bigger? Don't worry, this isn't a trick question. It's clearly the one on the right. Right?
Gotcha, bitch.
Well, actually, both circles are exactly the same size, but our mind just perceives the circle on the right to be larger. And this is a good example of how our mind constantly uses reference points. So this shows how our minds are constantly comparing everything that we encounter to bigger, better, but however irrelevant things. And also, annoyingly, our minds aren't actually good at filtering out who we should and shouldn't compare ourselves to. Our brain is so bad at it, in fact, that we compare ourselves to literally anyone and anything that we see. So yes, even from the homeless guy on the street to your favorite rapper, you compare yourself to these people. And this is why, in my opinion, the overuse of social media and, you know, consuming content, consuming media like Netflix, TV and that kind of stuff, is so bad for our brains. Because if we're being honest, our brain has not got used to the fact that, you know, there's so many people that we're now aware of. Our brain has no clue who we should and shouldn't compare ourselves to. We were never supposed to be aware of this many people, because obviously our ancestors had, you know, this same brain, so they had to compare themselves to, you know, the other members of their tribe or their town or, you know, their group. And obviously that makes a lot more sense, because back in those times everyone had a role to play, so you kind of needed to know where you kind of sat in the rankings and hierarchy. But there's no reason why, you know, a little kid in like India should be comparing himself to a flipping Hollywood A-list celebrity. It just makes no sense. So by spending your time, you know, just pointlessly scrolling through TikTok and Instagram and all those other social medias, you're actually contributing to your own low self-esteem. So since happiness is so overrated, what we actually want is long-term contentment. And this can be achieved in multiple ways. And one of these ways is practicing gratitude. So by focusing on what you do have instead of what you don't have, you just realize how ungrateful you are for the most of things in your life and how much you actually take for granted each day. Like literally just telling someone like how grateful you are for them or how much you appreciate them, it literally gives you like a boost of happiness. And overall, just the feeling of being grateful for things, you kind of can't help but, you know, feel more fulfilled. And a good way to remain grateful on a day-to-day basis is to start your day with gratitude journaling. I've actually made a video about this that I'll put in the video somewhere up there. So another way is to savor things. And this is basically the idea that we often rush through the things that we actually enjoy and don't take time to really appreciate them. When's the last time you like proper like savored your mom's cooking? Like proper taking time to be grateful for the fact she actually took time to make you this. So instead of, you know, trying to rush and eat the food so you can go back to doing what you were doing, just taking time to slow down, probably enjoy the experience. Another way to achieve this is by investing in experiences instead of material things. It's tempting to fall into the, you know, the consumerist trap that, you know, buying that new car, buying the latest clothes or the new pair of trainers is what's going to make you finally happy. What actually does help increase our happiness is experiences. And this is because, if we're being honest, experiences are just harder to compare to others. And it's also harder for our brains to adapt and get used to them. Like, it's rare that, you know, you'll go on holiday and tell someone about it and then they'll try and compete with their holiday. And it's kind of hard to compare who had a better time on their holiday or some shit like that, innit? Like, if you're contemplating, you know, if it was worth taking that trip, it always is. Practicing kindness is also another way to achieve long-term happiness. That's because being kind literally makes you feel better. Whether it's, you know, just helping a stranger with directions, letting a loved one know that you appreciate them, or just buying your bro some food when he's broke. Because what I found is that it actually feels better spending money on others than it does on yourself. So I want you to challenge yourself to do at least one act of kindness every day. And you'll definitely notice a change in your overall mood and happiness. Social connection is another major factor for happiness. And it's not a surprise because we as humans, we are social creatures. But we've also lost a lot of our social skills in, the last couple of generations due to increase of use of technology to basically subsidize for communicating with actual humans. It's actually scientifically proven that spending too much time alone can actually reduce your happiness. So make sure to spend time with friends and family on a regular basis. And if you don't have any of those, even just starting up random conversations with strangers can improve your well-being. And if I'm being honest here, I actually did this for a while when I was like going through quite a weird, isolated period in my life. I literally just go up to strangers and ask them for directions to places that I already knew were. And I gotta be honest, like 9 times out of 10, it ends up being a positive experience, and you just end up walking away with a little smile on your face. That, alright, lastly, but also super important, is just to have healthy practices. So this includes things like exercising regularly, meditating, and getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. Because these are actually proven ways to increase your long-term happiness. Because we all know how hard it is to have a good day when you've had like barely any sleep. And as someone who now does most of these healthy practices, I can actually tell you that this actually works. I have literally become such a more positive and happy person since I've, started exercising regularly, meditating regularly, and I'm still working in it, but making sure I get my 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. And I'm certain that if you incorporate these things, you will notice massive changes in your happiness and your mood altogether. And you'll realize you probably don't need as much as you thought you did to be happy. Alright guys, remember, life's a journey of emotions, and it's okay to embrace the ups and downs. And if this video got you thinking, or maybe even sparked a debate, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. Make sure, you subscribe and like the video, all that YouTube stuff. If you want to learn more about improving your long-term happiness and well-being, make sure you watch this one and sub so you don't miss the next video. Alright guys, appreciate you. Peace.